Okay, we are ready to kick off our fourth V office hours. The Mainspring FileMaker user group. I think the last three have been pretty successful from the standpoint of getting information from point A to point B. In this one, we are going to be talking about API integration, and my co-host with this, if you want to kick the next slide, Ryan, is Ryan Klenk. He was also the person that did dashboarding as well, which was our highest attended and most requested for the videos that we've had so far. So without further ado, let's kind of do the housekeeping. This is not a webinar. It's very, throw the participation out there. I think if you got the video, throw the video on. That would be awesome to see faces. We also, again, I'm going to be throwing some polls out there. Mike Bergey's going to be handling the chat room. So if you've got questions, throw them in the chat, and hopefully he will get them. He'll get them cooking. And then we are recording this, so I'll be able to do a post-meeting distribution. So next up is basically just jumping into it. Ryan, you and I have done quite a bit of chatting around about APIs and integration. And I've always said that one of the things that I love about FileMaker is the fact that you can go into other systems, dip in, grab information, pull it into FileMaker, put kind of sidecar fields on it, and see a more holistic look of your environment. What are some of the examples that you've done of API integration? What are some of the apps that you've done?
Yeah, so we've done obviously internally we have a tool that we built to connect Trello and HubSpot and Harvest into one kind of pane of glass for us to keep track of our metrics. So for those not familiar, Harvest is a time tracking utility. It's how we track all of the time that we build to our clients. Trello is a project management solution. So it's kind of got that Kanban board, and that's kind of how we handle our project management side of things. And HubSpot is our marketing. So we've got kind of a FileMaker solution that dips into all three of those systems and kind of collates that data and compiles statistics and allows us to do things like forecast and see historical performance, both expected and actuals, that sort of thing. So that's been a really nice one. For other clients, I've done things like there's services out there where you can send a handwritten, send an email to this company or whatever, and then they take that and they write out a postcard or a note or a letter or whatever and mail that off to somebody. So we've done that before. We set it up with their API. You click a button, type in a message, click a button. It sends off a request to that company. And obviously on their end, they receive that request and they kind of take it from there. So, from their perspective, all they're doing is typing a message, hitting a button, and then their contact receives a handwritten note in the mail, which was pretty neat. And tons of just pulling in data and associating it with their existing FileMaker ecosystem and allowing them to generate new and interesting statistics off of that. So it's definitely kind of a two-way street. For the purpose of our demo that we've got coming up, we've kind of got one way of that. We've got the reading, but it's a writing thing too. It's sending information out into the void and letting other companies take care of that information and do something with it.
Gotcha. So that's really what I wanted to do today is kind of do the cooking show. Like here I am sitting here with FileMaker. Ryan, how do I even know if some app that's out there, because there's a ton of web apps that do very vertical things that you might want to connect, like what you just described. I can write up a little note in FileMaker, keep it with my contacts, push a button, and I'm sending it to somebody that then does a handwritten note for clients. I think that's super cool. Um, I saw another one where FileMaker was connected to Watson, and it was a little bit of what Bergie was doing last week with the looking at ratings as to whether they were positive or negative. But it's FileMaker to Watson, for the love of God. I thought that was awesome. But really, what I wanted to do today is just kind of jump into it and say, okay, I want to connect to one of these APIs, one of these web apps. Where do you even start? How do you get started? How do you know if they even have it? Where do you kind of go from there?
Yeah, good question. So I think usually the first thing that you're going to be looking for is, whether or not they have an API. So for example, HubSpot, which we were kind of just mentioning, if you go kind of way down to the bottom, I don't know, somewhere on this page, you'll find like a developer portal. You almost, a lot of times it's going to be easier just to like Google that thing that you're looking for, an API, and you'll probably get to it that way. Sometimes you can find it like right on their homepage. But if they have an API, they're probably going to want to advertise that they have an API, and they're going to want to make it accessible to you. So that's what you're really looking for, is do they have an API, and then where's the documentation for that? So here with HubSpot, we found it pretty quickly with a simple Google search for HubSpot and API, and we get tons of information about the possible routes that we have available to us. So their CMS pages, or their CRM pipelines, and their events, so email analytics or web analytics, and so on. And usually, again, it's usually in the company's best interest to make all of this super accessible for the developer. So it shouldn't be too hard to find if you're looking for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then, just looking at this, how do you determine what the heck you can do? Like, how would I know with like HubSpot, can I pull data in, can I pull a contact from HubSpot, do something with it in FileMaker, and then put it back into a field in HubSpot? How do I even know that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really is kind of like you have to have a little bit of experience and know what you're looking for. Um, but you're looking for like specific endpoints, and usually they'll show you what kind of what the endpoint is. They'll give you some sort of description about what it expects to receive from you and what it is going to return back to you. So looking at contacts, I kind of come down here to their CRM aspect, and just guessing. I think owners is probably going to give me contacts, and kind of looking in, it looks like that's at least partially correct. And this is like the endpoint, so this is where we would send our request to, and this is kind of the format that it would expect it to be in. And obviously, if this has a FileMaker equivalent, you can see they have like a bunch of languages and how to do it in those languages. They don't have it in FileMaker, obviously. Most people won't.
We'll have to lobby them for that, right?
Definitely. I mean,
I'm writing my congressman as we speak with that app that you wrote, that then we'll send them a note. So we got that down. So I know that I know with HubSpot, the owner, what they're talking about is who owns that contact within HubSpot. So it looks like you could pull out, if I've got a record in FileMaker, I could look that record up in HubSpot and then figure out who the owner is as well.
Yeah.
And maybe do something with that. Who knows? Chart it, graph it, whatever the story is.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, looking here, it looks like there's this objects, and then contacts is probably what we actually want. So owner is
right.
like, who give me all the contacts from this owner, and then contacts is just give me these contacts directly. So yeah, it's really, I mean, it's not going to be a clean cut, like this is step one and this is step two. You really do have to kind of read their documentation and figure out exactly how they're making what available to you and how to access that data. Because everybody's going to have different terminology, and everybody's going to have different organizational structures, and they're going to think about things a little bit differently from you. There are going to be standards there, but you can kind of think of it as like the furniture is just going to be arranged just a little bit differently from house to house. Some people like their couch against the wall, some people like it in front of the window.
Gotcha. So if I wanted to learn this, where do you have any sites or anything that I might go to? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot. I always think of this stuff like live,
Yeah,
but
I mean, yeah, as in like learning just about like.
yeah, like this for me, for the pedestrian developer that you guys won't let me do anything. You kind of keep me in my little box. It's like, well, how do I learn about this? How do I learn, what the different furniture looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, when you're talking about like learning APIs or API design or anything like that, I mean that you're really kind of getting into more of a general standpoint. So your resources are really kind of the world, but some specifics. There's like sites out there like Egghead would be one where they have like instructional videos. I imagine they have something on like APIs and interactions. They're probably not going to be like FileMaker specific, but like they'll have some information about APIs. So they'll have specific courses about it. There's lynda.com, which has training videos. And I believe there is like a really good FileMaker course up there.
Yeah. I think Chris Hippolyte's put a bunch of stuff in there for
Yeah. So
FileMaker.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine he doesn't have something in there about FileMaker specifically related to API stuff. Yeah, I wish I had a better like straightforward answer to that, but
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
open because there's a lot of different concepts, and there it's not all just FileMaker there. It's like APIs are kind of what the entire web more or less runs on these days is services kind of sending information back and forth through these APIs. So it
Gotcha.
it's a pretty big topic.
Okay. So you have cooked up in the lab a little demo with FileMaker and a newspaper, from what
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah. I mean, it's something really simple, just for the purposes of being able to like talk through like how exactly to do it. I'm not trying to add too much complexity here. I'm not trying to do like a whole bunch of whiz bang things. I'm really just trying to send a request, and I use the New York Times just because they have an API and it's really easy and accessible to get into. So I use that, and I'm just going to essentially walk through kind of some of the steps, and feel free to interrupt me if you have questions.
Oh, you know it.
So I've got this set up, and I'm going to show what it does first off. I've got just a simple like text input and a research button, and you can do something like search for Washington D.C. And what that's going to do here is it's going to send a request off to the New York Times, and it's going to say, give me 10 articles about Washington D.C. And then we're going to pull that back in, and we're going to have this data actually in FileMaker. So we now have 10 new article objects or article records in our system from the New York Times. And again, we accomplished that through just sending that request to an API. And we can kind of click on them and open them up and access them that way as well. So without any further ado here, I'll dig into kind of the nuts and bolts a bit. So I think there's kind of obviously the interface side of it is just like kick all this off, which is what this script does. And we'll make this file available to everybody at the end of this call so that you can kind of root through it yourself if you want to. But we're sending this article search script a query, and we're essentially just kind of passing that along to the New York Times. So usually when you're working with an API, there's two different ways that they'll ask you to communicate with it. It can either be key-based, or it could also be authenticated through OAuth. So OAuth is a little more complicated to do because there's a whole authentication scheme, and what you're effectively doing there is you're allowing your application to masquerade as the user who's using it. So what that means is if I wanted to like open up my Google Calendar events, right? Not just anybody could do that, right? I would need to specifically authorize that. So that's what OAuth would allow you to do. It would allow you to tell Google that you're acting on behalf of this person, give me these events. And that's what happens when if you've ever like logged into a system and they show you like the Google prompt or the Office 365 prompt. And even though you're not originally on those sites, you can authenticate there and then have access to your data through those sites. So that's exactly what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But the key one is a lot simpler because it's pretty much just like you can send us requests. All you need is a special code and we'll let you in. So I've got a code here. Usually, getting it set up is as easy as like they'll have in their console, their developer console, they'll have like a way to create a new key. And you can see we created this key here. Yeah, I mean, pretty much this allows us to, we send this along with our request. And without this, our request would fail. But with it, New York Times knows that we are an authorized user and will allow us to proceed. So what that obviously lets them do is if we're a bad actor in some way, if we're breaking their policies or using their service in a way that their kind of terms of service doesn't allow, they can disable our access.
So to give you this key, they're going to do all the rigmarole to make sure that you're who you say you are, throwing an email to verify the email address that you've assigned and the whole nine, right? So, I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's not like you're not like sitting down for an interview with these people. It's usually a pretty automated process, but it's just kind of giving them some way to deny you access if they want to.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then obviously, like if you try to like get around, circumvent, you have to give a new API key, and they could shut down your account totally. And it's just a way to protect themselves is really what that's all about.
And pretty much every API that you use would have this, right?
Yeah, I mean, almost definitely. If not, they're kind of opening themselves up to a lot of trouble down the road. If somebody is misusing their API, it's kind of like pretty hard to shut down just that person without that concept of a key.
Gotcha. So step one, get your key.
Yeah, step one, get your key, or more accurately, just decide how or figure out how you can authenticate against it. If they require OAuth, again, it's possible, but it's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot more steps involved there. You have to display that OAuth authorization screen to the user and pull out secret keys. I think if you have to do that one, just call us and we'll take care of it for you. So we've got the key here. I set up my query. I pulled my query out of the parameters that we gave to the script, and I set up the URL. So normally I'm not gonna. I don't know if I'm gonna like define the key within the script here. I might have this in like its own table, but for the purposes of a demo, it's fine here. And then I've got my URL structure set up here. So you can see I've got this URL and I've got this section here, which is what we call the endpoint. So we're communicating with this server at this endpoint and with this parameter being q equals query. And then we're also saying, here's my API key so that you can make sure that I'm authorized and allowed to send you this request. So again, without this API key argument, they're not going to give us a response, or at least not the response that we're looking for. They might give us a response like, you're not authorized to do this.
Let me ask you one quick question though. If I'm setting this up with a multi-user file maker, I don't need every user to set up their own key, right? I mean, just the system would have to do it, and then the user security would be handled by FileMaker, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that key thing, I mean, it's really a key for your application to be authenticated against it, not like the individual user.
Gotcha.
So as far as like how to like figure out which which endpoint we need to communicate with, all that, again, it's just a simple matter of documentation. You can see their console looks like this, and we've got this article search. It tells you exactly what the path is. It gives you an example call. Like I said, it's in their best interest to facilitate this, because otherwise people won't use this, and they've kind of wasted their time setting up this API that nobody's ever going to use, right? So it's usually pretty easy to navigate kind of what you need to do and kind of get examples and work with that. And if not, I'm sure if you email them, they'll usually be pretty happy to help out. So in this case, I've got my URL set up, and then I call, this is where kind of the magic happens on the FileMaker end, is insert from URL. So this is a FileMaker script step that we can use to send a request to a web server, and that web server is going to return something back. It's got a bunch of options here. Select entire contents kind of does what it sounds like. It takes whatever's currently in your target, and it's going to replace it with this result. So our target is just a variable, results. You could do a field if you wanted to. I think usually if you're going to be working with like an API, you're probably going to want to like get it in a variable and kind of parse it out a little bit before you work with it. Your URL, which we've defined up here. Whether or not to verify SSL certificates, good practice just to say, yeah, go ahead and always verify those, and that will help you protect against potential like man-in-the-middle attacks or other security issues or concerns that might pop up without an SSL certificate in the equation. And then curl options. So for this one, I actually don't even need this option because this is the default, is a GET request. This is the method of the HTTP request. So if you look at the MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network docs, you can see all the available HTTP methods available to you. The most common ones used are GET. So you're usually going to use GET to read data from an API. Like anytime you need to retrieve data, you're going to use GET. Post is usually going to be used to like affect some change on that endpoint. So if you're like creating records or potentially sending an email or whatever through an endpoint, it's probably going to be post. And there's a really good reason for that. GET requests, when your site gets crawled by Google, it's going to send everything with a GET, and you don't want them to like accidentally create records just by like crawling your website. And just, I mean, and it's a standard as well. It's just, how you're supposed to set these up. Put would be like, replacing a record with the data that you have. So it's kind of like modifying it, but, like I've got version 1, the server has version 2, and we're going to totally replace version 2 with version 1. And then patch would be like partial modifications. So that would be like, I've got version 3 and the server has version 2, and I'm going to take the differences between the two and update them. So, if I'm omitting some fields in a put request, then they're going to be cleared out on the server copy. But if I omit them in a patch request, it's going to just merge them together. It's not going to remove that data on the server side. And then delete, self-explanatory, deletes it. And there's these other ones as well, but they're way less frequently used in this kind of context. So we don't really need to cover them too much.
It seems like some of this stuff is based on the system you're going to. Like I know that you, with our internal FileMaker system between HubSpot and Trello and everything, I know that I have you setting records in HubSpot for statuses of contacts based on the information in those two. But it's not like you're going to be able to post a story into the New York Times, right? I mean, so it's basically some things you can do, some things you can't, right?
Yeah, so I mean that's really what API stands for. Like I think it's application programming interface. So it's what they want to make available to you, right? So you obviously internally they might even have these API methods that you're just not authenticated for. But as far as like what's available to you, that's where with these, this documentation comes into play, and all that. So yeah, they're very explicitly defining the routes that are available to you, defining how you call them, like what options they take, and then defining what that response is going to potentially look like to you.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I don't even necessarily have to specify this, but I can with this dash X flag for like the uh, full gamut of like what's available. Just check the documentation. This is 16, but it's still mostly relevant here. Let me see if I can find the 19 version. This is 17, a little bit better.
Warmer,
Colder there.
colder.
But this is what I was really looking for anyways, is this supported curl options article. So I mean, obviously that insert from URL help document is useful, but this is really what I'm looking for, is like all the curl options that the insert from URL script step supports. So curl is like a, as it says, open standard library of software functions. It's like, I could do it from, here I could do curl google.com, and it's going to give me, Google's response to that request. So FileMaker is effectively, it's using that same kind of technology to make these API calls. And obviously they implement these specific options available to you. I don't think these are all of them. And obviously there's some that are FileMaker specific.
Is there one of these for 19? Because I think I'll find it. And Mike, if you could, well, it's not going to help us in the chat, but
yeah, I mean, it's almost certainly around. It's, I think the crawlers have got to catch up with the new release though.
But this should be.
Yeah, this will
similar.
still be relevant for.
Does this change from FileMaker release to FileMaker release, or is this more on the web side? Does this have anything to do with FileMaker, or does it have more with the technology on the?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of both. So FileMaker implements these. So, from version to version, they could add new options, or they could even, it's unlikely, but they could potentially change like how some of these work. So, it's possible, but I don't know off the top of my head any like major changes to this from 18 to 19. So this should.
Yeah, they added a whole bunch in 19. I just posted a link in the chat to the ones added.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I'll open that up, then we can talk about that one specifically.
Not a whole bunch. There's like 5 that they added.
Yeah, so, there you go.
That's not the same one. I just posted it a second ago.
Oh, there it is.
There you go.
Okay.
That's what's new in 19.
Yeah, so there's definitely some new ones there. Were you able to find like the full curl help document?
No.
Still MIA?
No.
All right, well, we'll find that eventually, I'm sure.
Well, we'll find it, and I'll throw it in a little text doc or something. Grab some of these links when I do the post delivery of materials. Okay.
I mean, a lot of these you're probably not going to use. It's going to be something that if you need it, you probably know you need it. For most API calls, like this sort of stuff is probably not going to be something that you need. So I would say for the vast majority of the cases, like this article should still be perfectly fine. I think even the majority of these are probably not going to be ones that you ever really have to dig into. The important ones are going to be like the dash X, or alternatively you do double dash request. There's dash D, or it's double dash data, where you can specify like if I'm creating a record on the API side, obviously I need to tell the API what data should go where, and I could do that with this data flag. You could also do like, binary data or whatever if you've got like a file that you have to upload. I think form could potentially be used. Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's a lot more here than we really need to dig into. But anyways, so with this one, I really don't need really any options at all. I've specified this one just to show how to do it. But I could have theoretically left that blank because Git is the default. And what that's going to do is after this runs, results will contain whatever the New York Times gave us back. So whatever, based on our query, based on our request and the API key, whatever they determined is the appropriate result for that request will live in that variable. So after some experimentation, I know that it's going to include the status, and that status is going to be okay, or there's going to be an error. So if it's not okay, I got it set up to pull out that error string, that message that they gave us, and return it back to whoever called. Otherwise, I just send back the response that they gave us, like whatever, articles or whatever that they gave us. So we can kind of run this real quick. We'll do this is the debugger. Kind of step through. So we've got our subject right here, which is Fairfax, and we send that as a parameter named query to our article search script. So these are our parameters, and this is our query. And then from that, we build out our URL. So you can see when we appended that data, this is like, that path. And then this is our query right here, this Fairfax bit. And then here's our API key that they're going to expect from us. And then when we call that, we'll receive a response from them. And you can see our status is okay. We get some copyright information. And then we get this response object. And this is probably a little hard to read. This is JSON data. If you're not familiar with JSON, you may want to do a lot more research on it before you kind of dig into APIs, because I would say most APIs these days are going to expect JSON as part of your request if you need to send along data, and they're going to return that data as their response as JSON. So it's just a method of formatting data. Essentially, it's a way to organize the data that makes it safe to pass along different types of data, numbers versus text, or different structures. So if the order matters, you would use like an array, that sort of thing. There's kind of a lot behind that you would need to like dig into, but FileMaker does have a set of functions specifically for managing JSON data, like JSON get element is the one that we're going to be using a lot of here. And it takes in some JSON and a key or index or path, and we'll return the data out of that. So you can see in this case, they've got some JSON, and they say, give me the data at the path of, or the key of B, which would be 22. So same kind of thing here. If you ever see like a big, ugly block of JSON, like we just saw, you could always come into your data viewer, do watch, and do JSON format elements, and pass it in there, and it'll organize it into kind of that nice indented structure. That makes it a little bit easier to read. So specifically here, we've got this like response object. We've got this docs array, right? We know it's an array because it's got the square bracket instead of the curly bracket. And then docs is going to be essentially our articles. Each one of these docs in the docs array is an individual article that we need to parse out and break out into a FileMaker record. So we'll exit out of the article search function. right? So that script's entire job was like, talk to that API and give me that data. And now we can pass that data along to a different script that processes it into FileMaker data. So we got this process articles function that takes our articles, which is just that docs array basically. And it just steps through each item in that array and breaks it out into a FileMaker record. So we're taking the article data and kind of one by one, pulling out the headline, pulling out the lead, the abstract, the link to the image, the date, and the actual web link to that article. Going into FileMaker, going to the article table and creating a new record with that data. And you can see we do another insert from URL. Insert from URL, you don't necessarily have to use it with just APIs. In this case, I used it to grab the actual image that they link to. Like they give us a URL to an image that represents that article image. We just pull it right from there. Otherwise, we use like a placeholder image. And we navigate back and we kind of proceed on through to the next article. So as far as like how we might even know that we need to pull out the headline or the lead paragraph or the abstract, it's really just kind of looking at the documentation and the response that you get and noting, what they'll return to you, and then developing around that. So it's not really any cut and dry kind of thing. You pretty much just have to, that API, it's kind of like a little bit of a contract between you and them. They're saying that if you send this request and it meets these conditions, we'll send you back a response that looks something like this. So then you could code around that response and know that it's not going to change, most likely.
How long did it take you to put this together?
I don't know, like a couple of hours maybe.
Okay. So somebody who knows what the heck they're doing, this was pretty straightforward to do it, right?
Yeah, I probably spent more time trying to find like an API that I wanted to
that would actually be demoable.
Yeah, something simple and easy to kind of pull in and mess around with. But the actual development here was not a big deal at all.
Well, this is kind of cool because if you had a product or if you were in a marketing research firm, it's one thing to Google or search through New York Times, but it's another thing to be able to capture the articles in a database that then allow you to do some kind of metrics around them.
Oh yeah.
So I could see once you get those records in the FileMaker, man, you can have your way with them.
Right.
And then throw some machine learning on that to determine whether the article on your product was positive or negative, and away you go. I mean, I've always said that FileMaker acting as a single pane of glass to all these disparate systems is one of the unmarketed, really powerful features of FileMaker, and that works. I'm going to put you on the spot, and maybe you need to tag team to Mike because he was on the ETS for Claris Connect. But how does this compare and contrast? And I do think we should do a session on Claris Connect. I've got it up as one of the options for our next meeting. But why? In what situations would you choose to do this as opposed to Claris Connect? What would be the factors of your decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think of Claris Connect as like I'm fitting this into my daily workflow kind of thing. So, and a good example might be like I don't know, like they have a MailChimp integration. So I might have something set up where when I create a new record in FileMaker, a new contact with an email address, that automatically gets pushed up to MailChimp. It's not something that I have to like schedule on my end. It's just kind of Claris Connect will kind of take care of all the inner workings there. or vice versa. If I've got, a new contact that comes into HubSpot, Clarus Connect will see that and automatically push that down to FileMaker. Whereas, I mean, API, doing it kind of like the native FileMaker way would be more like if Clarus Connect doesn't offer a connector or a flow for that, or if you need to grab like a whole bunch of data and then, massage it and process it, or work with it kind of on a larger scale. I see Clarus Connect again. It's just kind of like, it's like fitting a piece into your workflow, whereas APIs are much more, I don't know, like data heavy, if that makes sense. And Mike, I obviously would love your input here as well.
Your input was pretty much right on key. The advantage of Clarus Connect is it takes out any of this coding. Really, from a development standpoint, it puts those the tools for you to be able to do this style of programming without having to know anything about programming. So if you don't want to have to figure out how to do OAuth authentication or API validation, or how to make a curl request, or how to digest the results of that curl request, then Clarus Connect walks through all of that with you in a guided form that it's point and click. It doesn't require you to have any programming knowledge at all. The downside of Clarus Connect that everybody knows about is the price. Most APIs you're doing for free, or you're doing because you already have an account. Like HubSpot, you have an account that you're paying for, so you get the API as a part of that. So if you try to use Clarus Connect to do something with HubSpot, now you're paying for two things. So that compounds up, and your monthly fees go up. So a lot of people will say, they'll look at the cost of Clarus Connect for the next 3 years, and they'll look at the cost of, hiring somebody like me to develop that, so that there's no extra fee. And then they'll compare the two numbers, and whichever one's cheaper is the one they'll go with. But the other thing that Clarus Connect is good for is it allows you to do a whole bunch of actions really fast. So 10 hours of my time in Clarus Connect will get you a much larger integration project ready and up and running than 10 hours of API development time. So maybe 10 hours of API development time, we're getting you one small action together. But 10 hours of Clarus Connect, you could maybe have 50 actions set up. It's much quicker for you to integrate two services together.
But with Clarus Connect, they have to have the service built in. Like, you couldn't necessarily go to New York Times with Clarus Connect if Clarus Connect doesn't have that connectivity, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But, also
okay.
In the roadmap for Clarus Connect is the ability to both build your own connectors and for the private community to build third-party connectors. So,
well, I think Clarus Connect,
that will be less of a reason.
Yeah. And I think that Clarus Connect fits into the brand promise of FileMaker of the citizen developer. Like everything that I've seen here, it would take me forever to figure out how to do that. With Clarus Connect, boom, it's taken care of. So if I have we all know the world's changing, your members or clients are changing, your organization is changing, and that's the beauty of FileMaker. It's a low cost, low development way to follow that around as changes happen. We have the phrase continuous improvement. And I think the advantage of Clarus Connect might be that if you're trying to react to changes as the citizen developer or as the in-house developer, it might make sense to just pay the value of Clarus Connect to not have to go through this aspect either. So, like I said, I definitely think we should do a kind of a deep dive into Clarus Connect, not just kind of the surface skimming of what Clarus has put out, but actually, like go a little deeper and use case and things like that. I do think that it fits the the brand promise of Clarus with FileMaker. It's an interesting little product. Yeah. So that from there, to kind of summarize then, Ryan, once you get everything into fields of FileMaker, it's a bit game on, right? Like now you can take this information and what about things and maybe we maybe we need to delete this, burn this demo down and never talk about it again. But what about copyright stuff? Like you just imported a bunch of articles from the New York Times. Do you have to be wary of that aspect of
Yeah, I mean that's I feel like that one's a little outside of my wheelhouse.
you didn't practice law as well?
Yeah, like they'll
Yeah,
have licensing stuff on their if they have some specific terms and conditions around their data, like and what you can do with it, they'll
right,
tell like so they have this API here, and um, you know uh, I don't see, yeah, do I have to agree to terms? Here's your terms of use. So I think as long as you, like, if you're worried about it, you
right.
can just read through these or get a lawyer to read through them and make sure that you're, but yeah, in general, I don't think like pulling in data that is publicly accessible from the New York Times and using it as part of your work, uh, I would be really surprised if that ran afoul of like any
Right.
issues. I think it'd be
Well,
more
most things that you connect to, you kind of own the data. Like I would say the majority of things, like you're giving your data to that company to create the cards. It's our data in HubSpot that we're querying and moving around. It's our data in Trello, back and forth. So um, I think it's something that you have to look out for, but it's like you said, digging through the T's and C's and figuring out what people are New York Times is allowing you to do or not allowing you to do.
I think as long
Okay.
as you use like common sense around it, you'll be fine. As long as you're not like using this API to sell, the content to somebody else, then
Right, right.
nobody's going to come knocking. I think.
That's our next office hours where we're going to teach you how to connect to Stripe and resell resell the New York Times information using a combination of Claris Connect APIs and Stripe. That's a great revenue stream there, Ryan. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so a little bit wrapping up. I see that we've got some questions. I've asked Mike to kind of answer the questions as they come in. Does anybody have kind of the stump the Schwab that they'd like to throw at Ryan? Either unmute yourself and shout it out, or throw it into the group chat. We got anything?
I'm not sure if this is in line with our topic today or what's been addressed in the chat so far, but I'm curious, what do I need to know to use the data API with FileMaker Server in different flavors or versions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's kind of the other side of this that we didn't even really touch on at all is we've been kind of focused on coming from FileMaker out to the world and grabbing the world's data and bringing it into your system. But there's obviously the other side of it is you can make your data available to the world as well. And that's where the FileMaker data API comes into play. So that would be something that you enable on the server side, and it exposes, well, you have to obviously set your system up for it, but what it does is it exposes specific endpoints in your system to be read from, and it exposes, I mean, you could set it up to like create records or run scripts or whatever. So access via FileMaker Data API, the account needs access to that. And you set it up on a layout level. So if you want somebody to read from the articles layout, you have a layout that account has access to, and you have the relevant fields available there. And then I can never find it easily, so I'm probably not going to be able to find it here, but I'm looking for, oh yeah, it's going to be server based. This full data API doc reference here. Let me see if I can.
I already, well, never mind. That's different than the API guide. I posted a link to the API guide so you would be able to kind of see what's all available.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll roll from the API guide. This is like this API doc, this URL. If you've got FileMaker Server installed, you can go here, and that gives you kind of like the full, like almost like the New York Times, like you know, response and requests and all that sort of stuff. It kind of gives you more of this view of it. But you know, the data API guide will work. You said you got that in the chat there.
So that might be, you might use that in the case where you are collecting data and, you know, all joking aside, you're possibly selling it or distributing it to other systems.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't like, I don't know. I think if I were really opening the my server data out to the outside, I would want some sort of a wrapper sitting in between. Personally, you know, just because FileMaker is expecting kind of a really, they're going to expect kind of a really verbose request, and they're going to give you a really verbose response back, just because of the way the data, you know, how everything is set up. It's all very abstracted, and everything is organized in a very specific way. So if I were exposing that to the public, I would want something in between that translates a shorter request and returns a shorter response than what you would get natively. But yeah, you could totally sell your data. You could totally, you know,
or whatever your distribution is, or whatever your need to have it. I'm not necessarily selling information, but yeah, whatever.
What about, I think it's webhooks where, let's say I'm connecting, I'm used to, I've only done a few, but I'm used to using the API to request, to push or request data from a site, but there are some sites where they have a, you can do it the other way around, where let's say you want to be able to get notified if something happens instead of having to query it. And they can, you have to give it a URL, which is a webhook. You can do that with FileMaker Server and make it a recipient of pushed data.
It's actually not a good idea to use FileMaker Server for that. What you want is a separate web host that stores that code, and then that endpoint, that code that you host on that other web server, can be used to consume FileMaker's data API to update or add information to FileMaker. So we see a lot of people doing that serverless with like AWS Lambda can be used. You don't need a web server. It gives you a URL that you can use and receive data. And then when it receives the request, it runs the code and sends the data to FileMaker and then turns itself off. So you don't need a 24/7 server up and running just to run those. Or you can set up a web server. A Linux-based web server is, you know, only $5 or $10 a month for you to be able to host something like a PHP website for handling those webhook requests. But that's another thing that's comparable to what you can do with Claris Connect. So Claris Connect is
right.
Listening for an action to occur, and then it's sending the data to FileMaker.
Yeah, and on the AWS, just to add to that, it would, I think you could do with Lambdas, but you would also need, you could do like set up routes in AWS as well. So it would be like routes and Lambdas. You can connect them that way, and it works really well too. But that's a great point. That concept of like webhooks and shuttling that information in much the same way that Claris Connect is working from, you know, an external service as the origin point, and then that data ending up in your FileMaker system.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you have any other questions or anything, throw them over to answers@gomainspring.com.